They can insult you, they can betray you, they can try to break you, but none of it will work, not anymore. Because you're about to become mentally untouchable, not because nothing bad will happen to you. Bad things happen to everyone. You'll become mentally untouchable because nothing external will control your internal state anymore. Nothing people say will shatter your confidence. Nothing circumstances bring will destroy your peace. Nothing life throws will break your spirit. This is about building psychological armor so strong that the world's attacks bounce off. This is about developing mental fortitude so deep that chaos around you creates calm within you. This is about becoming so internally secure that external chaos becomes irrelevant. Most people are mentally fragile. Their mood depends on others' opinions. Their confidence depends on circumstances. Their peace depends on external validation. One criticism destroys them. One setback shatters them. One betrayal breaks them. They're mentally touchable, vulnerable, controllable. But there's another type of person, the one who remains calm in chaos. The one who stays confident despite criticism. The one who maintains strength despite setbacks. This person has built mental untouchability. They've developed ruthless lessons that create psychological invincibility. Niccolò Machiavelli was this type of person. Exiled from his beloved Florence, stripped of his position, even tortured, he remained mentally unbreakable. He wrote his greatest works during his darkest times. His mental fortitude was legendary because he understood something most people never learn. External circumstances do not determine internal state unless you allow them to. But before we unlock these 7 ruthless lessons, let me be absolutely clear. Mental untouchability isn't about becoming emotionless. It's not about not caring. It's not about being cold or disconnected. It's about having emotions without being controlled by them. It's about caring without being destroyed when things don't go your way. It's about being connected while maintaining unshakable inner strength. Today you'll discover the 7 lessons that transform mental fragility into mental untouchability. Now I want you to drop this affirmation in the comments. Nothing external controls my internal state. Before we continue, if you're tired of being mentally vulnerable and ready to become psychologically invincible, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and ring that notification bell. And tell me in the comments, what's one thing that currently has too much power over your mental state? An opinion, a person, a circumstance? Share it below because naming it is the first step to becoming untouchable to it. Now let's build your mental untouchability. Lesson 1. Detach outcome from identity. The reason most people are mentally fragile is they've tied their identity to their outcomes. When outcomes are good, they feel worthy. When outcomes are bad, they feel worthless. This attachment creates a psychological roller coaster where circumstances control their self-perception completely. Machiavelli understood that identity must be separate from results. You are not your successes. You are not your failures. You are the person who attempts things and sometimes succeeds and sometimes fails. That's identity. Everything else is just temporary outcome. Here's what happens when identity and outcome are fused. You launch a project and it fails. Since your identity was tied to that project succeeding, its failure becomes your failure. You don't just have a failed project, you become a failure. This destroys confidence, creates fear of trying again, and keeps you paralyzed. You ask someone out, and they reject you. Since your identity was tied to being accepted, their rejection becomes evidence of your unworthiness. You don't just experience rejection, you become rejectable. This destroys self-esteem and creates social anxiety. You compete for something and lose. Since your identity was tied to winning, losing becomes who you are. You don't just lose a competition, you become a loser. This destroys motivation and creates learned helplessness. The pattern is clear. When identity depends on outcome, every negative outcome damages identity. You become mentally touchable because circumstances dictate worth. Let me tell you about 2 entrepreneurs who faced identical failures. Entrepreneur A launched a business that failed spectacularly. He'd tied his identity to being a successful entrepreneur. When the business failed, he experienced identity collapse. He became depressed, stopped trying new ventures, and told everyone he'd failed at entrepreneurship. His mental state was destroyed because outcome and identity were fused. One business failure became permanent identity damage. Entrepreneur B launched a business that also failed spectacularly. But he'd separated identity from outcome. His identity was person who builds businesses, not successful entrepreneur. When the business failed, he experienced disappointment but not identity damage. He analyzed what went wrong, extracted lessons, and started planning his next venture. His mental state remained strong because outcome and identity were separate. One business failure became a learning experience, not an identity crisis. The difference wasn't capability or circumstances. Both failed identically. The difference was that one had fused identity and outcome, while the other had separated them. One became mentally untouchable, while the other became psychologically broken. The psychological principle here is called ego resilience. People with high ego resilience maintain stable self-perception despite changing circumstances. They see outcomes as information about their actions, not verdicts on their worth. This resilience makes them mentally untouchable because circumstances can't touch their core sense of self. Here's how you detach outcome from identity. First, define your identity by your values and efforts, not your results. You're not a successful person. You're a person who works hard toward goals. You're not a loved person. You're a person who treats others with respect. These identities are within your control. Results aren't. Second, treat all outcomes as data, not judgments. When something succeeds, the data says, this approach worked in this context. When something fails, the data says, this approach didn't work in this context. Neither outcome says anything about your fundamental worth as a human being. Third, practice the phrase, I had a failure, instead of, I am a failure. The first describes an event. The second describes identity. One is recoverable. The other is devastating. Language shapes psychology. Choose words that separate outcome from self. Fourth, remember that all outcomes are temporary. Today's success will be forgotten. Today's failure will be overcome. The only permanent thing is the character you're building through how you handle both. When you fully separate who you are from what happens to you, you become mentally untouchable. Outcomes become experiences you have, not verdicts on who you are. This single shift creates unshakable confidence because your worth is no longer hostage to circumstances. Lesson 2. Build strategic emotional distance. Most people are mentally fragile because they're emotionally enmeshed with everyone and everything around them. Someone criticizes them, they're devastated. Someone praises them, they're elated. Someone betrays them, they're destroyed. This emotional reactivity makes them mentally touchable because others control their emotional state completely. Machiavelli understood that emotional investment must be strategic, not universal. Care deeply about things that matter. Remain detached from things that don't. This selectivity creates emotional resilience. Here's what happens with universal emotional investment. A stranger online criticizes your work. Since you're emotionally invested in everyone's opinion, this criticism ruins your day. Someone you barely know doesn't invite you to something. Since you're emotionally invested in all social connections, this exclusion hurts deeply. A project you weren't that passionate about doesn't go well. Since you're emotionally invested in everything, this setback feels crushing. The pattern is clear. When you care about everything and everyone equally, you're vulnerable to everything and everyone equally. You become mentally touchable because every stimulus can affect you deeply. Let me tell you about two professionals receiving criticism. Professional A received harsh criticism on a project. She was emotionally invested in everyone's opinion equally. The criticism, even from people whose judgment she didn't particularly respect, devastated her. She couldn't sleep. She questioned her abilities. She considered quitting. Her mental state was destroyed by criticism from people who didn't actually matter to her goals. Professional B received identical criticism on a similar project, but she'd built strategic emotional distance. She'd identified whose opinions actually mattered to her goals. The criticism came from people not on that list. She noted it, evaluated if there was useful feedback, extracted what was valuable, and discarded the rest. Her mental state was unaffected because she'd strategically decided this person's opinion didn't have emotional access to her. The difference wasn't that Professional B was cold or didn't care about quality. She cared deeply about her work. The difference was she'd built strategic emotional distance from opinions that didn't serve her growth. She'd decided in advance whose criticism mattered and whose didn't. This strategic investment made her mentally untouchable to random criticism, while remaining open to valuable feedback. The psychological principle here is emotional economy. You have finite emotional capacity. Investing it universally means spreading it too thin. Investing it strategically means concentrating it where it creates value. Strategic emotional distance isn't about not caring. It's about caring selectively so deeply that universal caring becomes impossible. Here's how you build strategic emotional distance. First, identify who and what truly matters to your goals and values. Make an explicit list. These are your emotional investments. Everything and everyone else gets strategic distance. Second, practice the mantra, not my circus, not my monkeys, for everything outside your strategic investment zone. Drama that doesn't affect you? Not your circus. Opinions from people who don't matter? Not your monkeys. Let them exist without emotional engagement. Third, notice when you're emotionally reacting to things outside your strategic investment zone. Catch yourself getting upset about random criticism, stressed about others' problems, or invested in outcomes that don't affect you. Recognize this as wasted emotional energy and consciously withdraw it. Fourth, concentrate the emotional energy you're saving through strategic distance into deeper investment in what actually matters. Care more about the few things and people that align with your values and goals. This deep caring is more satisfying than shallow universal caring. When you build strategic emotional distance, you become mentally untouchable to most of what happens because most of what happens isn't strategically important to you. Random opinions become noise you don't process. Minor dramas become events you don't engage. Unimportant outcomes become data points you don't emotionalize. This selectivity creates mental fortitude because you're only vulnerable to things that actually matter, and there are far fewer of those than the universal everything that touches most people. Lesson 3. Embrace radical acceptance of reality. Most people are mentally fragile because they're constantly fighting reality. They argue with what happened. They resist what is. They demand the world be different than it is. This resistance creates suffering and mental fragility because reality doesn't care about your demands. Machiavelli understood radical acceptance. He didn't waste energy wishing things were different. He accepted reality exactly as it was and strategized from there. This acceptance created mental strength because he wasn't divided between reality and wish. Here's what resistance to reality creates. Something bad happens to you. Instead of accepting it and moving forward, you spend weeks asking, why me, and how could this happen? This resistance to reality keeps you stuck in the event, reliving it, fighting it, unable to move past it. You become mentally touchable because you can't process events and move on. Someone treats you unfairly. Instead of accepting that unfairness exists and strategizing accordingly, you spend months being angry that they shouldn't have done that. This resistance to human nature keeps you emotionally imprisoned by their action. You become mentally touchable because your peace depends on others behaving as they should instead of as they do. Life doesn't go according to your plan. Instead of accepting that plans change and adapting, you spend years mourning the plan that didn't happen. This resistance to change keeps you focused on a past that didn't occur instead of a present you could shape. You become mentally touchable because you're living in should be instead of what is. The pattern is clear. Resistance to reality creates suffering and mental fragility. Acceptance of reality creates peace and mental strength. Let me tell you about two people who lost their jobs unexpectedly. Person A lost his job and spent 6 months in resistance. He focused on how unfair it was, how it shouldn't have happened, how the company was wrong. He replayed the events obsessively. He stayed angry. His resistance to the reality that he'd lost his job prevented him from accepting it and moving forward. 6 months passed with no progress because he was mentally stuck fighting reality. Person B lost her job the same way. She allowed herself one day to feel the emotions, then moved into radical acceptance. This happened. It's unfair, but it happened. The company made this decision. I can't change it. Now what? She immediately started strategizing her next move, networking, and applying for positions. Within 2 months, she had a better job. Her acceptance of reality allowed her to process the event quickly and move into action. The difference wasn't that person B didn't care or wasn't hurt. She experienced the same emotions. The difference was she accepted reality instead of fighting it. She put her energy into response instead of resistance. This acceptance made her mentally untouchable because reality couldn't keep her trapped in should-be thinking. The psychological principle here is cognitive flexibility. People who can accept reality as it is, even when it's not what they wanted, adapt faster and suffer less. People who resist reality stay mentally stuck in events, unable to move forward because they're still fighting what already happened. Here's how you embrace radical acceptance. First, practice the phrase, "It is what it is," for every unwanted reality. This isn't resignation or defeat. It's acknowledgement. You can't change what already happened. You can only choose your response. Acceptance is choosing to stop fighting the unchangeable past and start shaping the controllable future. Second, catch yourself asking, "Why me?" or "How could they?" or "This shouldn't have happened." These questions are resistance to reality. Replace them with, "This happened, now what?" This shifts you from resistance to strategy. Third, give yourself brief time to feel emotions about unwanted reality. Then move to acceptance and action. Feel angry for an hour or a day, then accept and strategize. The emotion is valid. The endless dwelling in resistance is destructive. Fourth, remember that accepting reality doesn't mean liking it or approving of it. You can accept that someone betrayed you while still disliking it and choosing to never trust them again. Acceptance is acknowledgement, not endorsement. When you embrace radical acceptance, you become mentally untouchable because reality can't trap you in resistance. Bad things still happen, but they flow through you instead of sticking to you. You process, accept, and move on, rather than getting caught in should-be thinking that keeps you psychologically stuck in past events you can't change. Lesson 4. Develop outcome independence. Most people are mentally fragile because they need specific outcomes. They need the job. They need the relationship. They need the approval. This neediness creates mental vulnerability because their peace depends on getting what they need. Machiavelli understood outcome independence. Want outcomes, but don't need them. Prefer success, but accept failure. Desire victory, but tolerate defeat. This independence creates mental strength because your well-being doesn't depend on any specific outcome. Here's what outcome dependence creates. You desperately need a particular job. This desperation shows in your interview. You seem needy, which reduces your attractiveness. If you don't get it, you're devastated because you'd made your peace conditional on this outcome. Your mental state crashes. You desperately need a relationship to work. This desperation creates clinging behavior that pushes the other person away. If the relationship ends, you're destroyed because you'd made your happiness conditional on this person staying. Your mental state collapses. You desperately need others' approval. This desperation makes you people please and abandon your authenticity. When someone disapproves anyway, you're shattered because you'd made your worth conditional on their validation. Your mental state crumbles. The pattern is clear. Outcome dependence creates desperate behavior that actually prevents the outcome while setting up mental devastation if you don't get it. You become mentally touchable because your state depends entirely on external outcomes you don't fully control. Let me tell you about two candidates interviewing for the same position. Candidate A desperately needed this job. Financial pressures, career timeline, specific desire for this company, all created outcome dependence. In the interview, this showed. He was overly eager, agreed with everything, didn't negotiate effectively, and seemed desperate. The company sensed his neediness, and it reduced his perceived value. When he didn't get the offer, he was psychologically devastated. His outcome dependence had both hurt his chances and set up mental fragility. Candidate B wanted the job, but didn't need it. She had other options and had built her mental state independent of this outcome. In the interview, this showed. She was confident, asked challenging questions, negotiated effectively, and seemed valuable. The company sensed her independence and it increased her perceived value. When she got the offer, great. If she hadn't, she'd have been disappointed, but fine. Her outcome independence had both helped her chances and protected her mental state. The difference wasn't that candidate B didn't care about the job. She wanted it. The difference was she hadn't made her peace conditional on getting it. She'd maintained outcome independence that created both better performance and mental protection. The psychological principle here is the paradox of neediness. The more you need something, the more desperate you appear, and the less likely you are to get it. The less you need something, the more confident you appear, and the more likely you are to get it. Plus, outcome independence protects your mental state regardless of results. Here's how you develop outcome independence. First, always have multiple options. Never put yourself in a position where one specific outcome is your only path forward. Multiple options create genuine independence because you're not dependent on any single outcome. Second, build your self-worth independent of specific outcomes. Your worth isn't determined by whether you get the job, the relationship, the approval. Your worth is inherent. Outcomes are just outcomes, not verdicts on your value. Third, practice being okay with worst-case scenarios. If you don't get what you want, what happens? Usually it's disappointing but survivable. When you've accepted the worst case, you've eliminated the fear that creates neediness. Fourth, want outcomes without needing them. There's a difference. Wanting means you prefer one result but can accept others. Needing means you've made your peace conditional on one result. Choose wanting. When you develop outcome independence, you become mentally untouchable because no single outcome can devastate you. You're disappointed when things don't go your way, but not destroyed. Your mental state remains stable because it doesn't depend on any specific external result. Lesson 5. Master the art of perspective shifting. Most people are mentally fragile because they see events from only one perspective, and that perspective is usually catastrophic. One setback becomes permanent failure. One criticism becomes total inadequacy. One rejection becomes universal unworthiness. This perspective rigidity creates mental fragility because they can't see events any other way. Machiavelli was a master of perspective. Exiled and tortured, he could have seen himself as destroyed. Instead, he saw himself as having time to write and think. His greatest works came from his worst circumstances because he could shift perspective. Here's what perspective rigidity creates. You make a mistake at work. From one perspective, it's evidence you're incompetent and about to be fired. This perspective creates anxiety and mental fragility. You could shift perspective. It's one mistake in hundreds of successes. Everyone makes mistakes. It's an opportunity to learn and improve. But you can't. You're stuck in the catastrophic perspective, mentally touched by one event. Someone criticizes you. From one perspective, it means you're fundamentally flawed and everyone thinks less of you. This perspective creates shame and mental fragility. You could shift perspective. It's one person's opinion. They might be wrong. Even if valid, it's about behavior, not worth. But you can't. You're trapped in the catastrophic interpretation, mentally touched by one opinion. A relationship ends. From one perspective, it means you're unlovable and you'll be alone forever. This perspective creates despair and mental fragility. You could shift perspective. It means you weren't compatible with this person. You're now available for someone better suited. You learned valuable lessons. But you can't. You're imprisoned in the devastating interpretation, mentally touched by one outcome. The pattern is clear. Perspective rigidity keeps you stuck in interpretations that create suffering. Perspective flexibility allows you to choose interpretations that serve your mental strength. Let me tell you about two people who got rejected from their dream schools. Person A got rejected and saw it through one perspective. He was not good enough and his future was ruined. This perspective devastated him. He couldn't shift to other views. Maybe the school wasn't right for him. Maybe he'd thrive somewhere else. Maybe this redirected him to something better. His perspective rigidity kept him mentally fragile and devastated for months. Person B got rejected and initially felt the same disappointment, but she practiced perspective shifting. First perspective, this is devastating. Second perspective, many successful people got rejected from dream schools. Third perspective, maybe the school that accepted me is actually better for my specific goals. Fourth perspective, this builds resilience I'll need later. She cycled through perspectives until she found ones that were both true and empowering. Her perspective flexibility made her mentally untouchable because one interpretation couldn't trap her. The psychological principle here is cognitive reframing, the ability to see events from multiple perspectives and choose interpretations that serve you creates mental resilience. Events don't have inherent meaning. We assign meaning through perspective. When you can shift perspective, you can shift meaning, and therefore shift emotional impact. Here's how you master perspective shifting. First, practice asking, what else could this mean when something bad happens? Force yourself to generate at least 3 alternative interpretations beyond your initial catastrophic one. This builds perspective flexibility as a skill. Second, play devil's advocate with your catastrophic thoughts. If your thought is, this means I'm incompetent, argue the opposite. This means I'm learning and growing. Neither might be fully true, but practicing opposition to catastrophic thinking weakens its grip. Third, seek out perspectives from people who've experienced similar things. How did they interpret it? What meanings did they assign? This expands your perspective repertoire beyond your own limited view. Fourth, remember that future you will have a different perspective on today's events. What feels devastating today will likely feel minor or even positive from future perspective. This temporal perspective shift reduces current suffering. When you master perspective shifting, you become mentally untouchable because no single interpretation of events can trap you. You can choose perspectives that serve your mental strength, growth, and forward movement, rather than being imprisoned by the first, usually catastrophic interpretation your mind generates. Lesson 6. Build anti-fragility through exposure. Most people are mentally fragile because they avoid everything that challenges them. They stay in comfort zones, avoid difficult conversations, dodge challenging situations. This avoidance makes them progressively weaker because they never build the mental muscles that come from overcoming challenges. Machiavelli understood that strength comes from stress. Leaders who've never faced adversity crumble when challenges come. Leaders who've been tested repeatedly develop mental fortitude. You don't build mental untouchability by avoiding challenges. You build it by deliberately facing them. Here's what challenge avoidance creates. You avoid difficult conversations. Initially, this feels comfortable, but over time, your ability to handle conflict atrophies. When you eventually face unavoidable conflict, you lack the mental tools to handle it. Your avoidance has made you mentally fragile. You avoid situations where you might fail. Initially, this protects your ego, but over time, your resilience to failure disappears. When you eventually experience unavoidable failure, you're devastated. Your avoidance has made you mentally breakable. You avoid criticism by not putting yourself out there. Initially, this feels safe, but over time, your ability to handle judgment weakens. When you eventually face unavoidable criticism, you crumble. Your avoidance has made you mentally vulnerable. The pattern is clear. Avoiding challenges creates short-term comfort but long-term fragility. Facing challenges creates short-term discomfort but long-term strength. Let me tell you about 2 people building businesses. Person A avoided everything uncomfortable. He didn't make cold calls because rejection was uncomfortable. He didn't raise prices because pushback was uncomfortable. He didn't fire poor performers because confrontation was uncomfortable. He didn't try bold strategies because potential failure was uncomfortable. His comfort-seeking made him progressively weaker. When inevitable challenges came, business downturns, competitor pressure, he had no mental resilience. He folded quickly because he'd never built strength through facing challenges. Person B deliberately sought discomfort. She made cold calls specifically to build rejection tolerance. She raised prices specifically to practice handling pushback. She had difficult conversations specifically to strengthen confrontation muscles. She tried bold strategies specifically to learn from potential failure. Her discomfort-seeking made her progressively stronger. When inevitable challenges came, she had deep mental resilience. She adapted and persevered because she'd built strength through repeatedly facing challenges. The difference wasn't initial capability or circumstances. The difference was one person avoided challenges and became weak, while the other faced challenges and became strong. The psychological principle here is hormesis. the process where exposure to small stressors creates adaptation that makes you stronger. Muscles grow through stress and recovery. Mental strength grows the same way. Small doses of challenges, failures, rejections, and conflicts build mental resilience that makes you untouchable to larger versions later. Here's how you build anti-fragility through exposure. First, deliberately do things that scare you slightly. Not overwhelmingly, but uncomfortably. Have conversations you've been avoiding. Try things where you might fail. Put yourself in situations where you might be judged. Each exposure builds resilience. Second, reframe challenges as training. When difficult situations arise, see them as opportunities to build mental strength. This rejection is building my rejection resilience. This criticism is strengthening my criticism immunity. This failure is teaching me failure recovery. This reframe makes challenges valuable instead of just painful. Third, progressively increase challenge exposure. Start with small discomforts and gradually face larger ones. This progressive overload builds strength systematically without overwhelming you. Fourth, recover and integrate between challenges. Anti-fragility requires both stress and recovery. Face challenges, then process what you learned and how you grew. This integration solidifies the strength gained. When you build anti-fragility through exposure, you become mentally untouchable because you face so many challenges that new ones don't break you. You've built such deep resilience that stress makes you stronger rather than weaker. You've developed such robust mental muscles that life's difficulties become training sessions rather than threats. Lesson 7. Cultivate memento mori mindset. Most people are mentally fragile because they think they have unlimited time. Small setbacks feel catastrophic. Minor criticisms feel devastating. Temporary problems feel permanent. This time, blindness creates mental fragility because they've lost perspective on what actually matters. Machiavelli understood death. He lived in violent times where death was constant and visible. This awareness created mental strength because it provided ultimate perspective. Nothing matters as much as you think it does because eventually nothing will matter at all. This isn't depressing, it's liberating. Here's what forgetting mortality creates. Someone insults you and you spend weeks upset. You've forgotten that in 100 years you'll be dead. This person will be dead, and this insult will be completely forgotten. Your lost perspective makes you mentally touchable by something objectively trivial. You fail at something and feel like life is over. You've forgotten that you could literally die tomorrow, making this failure completely irrelevant. Your lost perspective makes you mentally fragile over something objectively minor. You obsess over what others think. You've forgotten that everyone is so focused on their own mortality and concerns that they barely think about you. Your lost perspective makes you mentally vulnerable to opinions that don't actually matter. The pattern is clear. Forgetting death makes small things feel big. Remembering death makes big things feel appropriately sized and small things disappear. Let me tell you about two people facing career setbacks. Person A got passed over for promotion and felt devastated. The setback consumed his thinking for months. He felt like a failure. His mental state deteriorated. He'd forgotten mortality, so this setback felt permanently significant. His lack of death awareness made him mentally touchable by a career event that, in the scope of a finite life, was relatively minor. Person B got passed over for the same promotion and felt initial disappointment. Then he practiced memento mori. I'm going to die someday. Will I remember this promotion in my last moments? Will it matter that I got promoted at 35 versus 37? In the scope of a finite life, how significant is this really? This death awareness gave him instant perspective. He processed the disappointment quickly and refocused on what actually mattered given his limited time. His mortality awareness made him mentally untouchable because he maintained perspective. The difference wasn't that person B didn't care about his career. He did. The difference was he maintained perspective about its significance given mortality. This perspective prevented a minor setback from becoming a major psychological crisis. The psychological principle here is existential perspective. When you remember that your time is limited, you naturally prioritize what actually matters and stop being devastated by what doesn't. Memento mori isn't morbid. It's clarifying. It's mentally strengthening. Here's how you cultivate memento mori mindset. First, regularly contemplate your mortality. Not obsessively, but intentionally. Imagine your death. Imagine your funeral. Imagine being forgotten. This isn't depressing when done constructively, it's perspective building. Second, when something upsets you, ask, will this matter on my deathbed? Most things won't. This question instantly provides perspective that reduces mental touchability. Third, use mortality to prioritize. You have limited time. What deserves your mental energy? What deserves your emotional investment? What deserves your concern? Mortality clarifies priorities because time is the ultimate constraint. Fourth, find liberation in impermanence. Nothing lasts, including problems, pain, and criticism. This impermanence means nothing deserves the permanent mental real estate we often give it. When you cultivate memento mori mindset, you become mentally untouchable because you've developed ultimate perspective. Small things stop touching you because you recognize their insignificance. Big things touch you less because you recognize their impermanence. You maintain mental equilibrium because you've zoomed out to the only perspective that ultimately matters. This is finite, so what actually deserves my mental energy? You've just learned 7 ruthless lessons for mental untouchability. But here's what separates people who know these lessons from people who embody them: daily practice. These aren't concepts to understand intellectually, they're practices to implement consistently. Knowledge without application is worthless. Here's your action plan. Choose the lesson you need most right now. Maybe you've been tying identity to outcomes. Maybe you lack strategic emotional distance. Maybe you resist reality. Maybe you're outcome dependent. Maybe you're stuck in one perspective. Maybe you avoid challenges. Maybe you've forgotten mortality. Choose one lesson and implement it today. Consciously separate one outcome from your identity. Build strategic distance from one opinion that's been affecting you. Accept one reality you've been resisting. Develop independence from one outcome you've been needing. Shift perspective on one event you've been catastrophizing. Face one challenge you've been avoiding. Use mortality perspective on one problem you've been obsessing over. One practice of one lesson today starts building your mental untouchability. Then tomorrow, practice again, and the next day, and the next. Mental untouchability isn't achieved through one insight. It's built through consistent practice of ruthless lessons until they become automatic responses rather than conscious efforts. But remember this truth. Mental untouchability doesn't mean nothing ever bothers you. It means nothing controls you. Things can still hurt, disappoint, or frustrate you, but they flow through you instead of sticking to you. They touch you momentarily instead of controlling you permanently. You process, learn, and move forward instead of getting stuck. That's the difference between mentally fragile and mentally untouchable. Fragile people get stuck in every setback. Untouchable people process and progress. Fragile people are controlled by circumstances. Untouchable people respond to circumstances. Fragile people break under pressure. Untouchable people adapt under pressure. Which are you becoming? If this video gave you the roadmap to mental untouchability, hit that like button. If you want more lessons on building unshakable psychological strength, subscribe and ring that notification bell. Drop a comment. Which of these 7 lessons do you need most right now, and what's one way you're going to practice it today? Your commitment might inspire someone else to start building their own mental untouchability. Until next time, remember this: the world will always try to touch you mentally. Criticism will come. Setbacks will happen. People will betray you. Circumstances will challenge you. You can't control any of that, but you can control whether any of it controls you. Build mental untouchability. Become psychologically invincible. Stay strong. Stay untouchable. Stay unbreakable.